Hello and welcome everybody to the next elemental conversation. This one is about metal, and you might get from the background video of mine that we're talking about the autumn energy, which is metal. This follows on from the earth elemental conversation, which was late summer, and preceded by fire, which was high summer. So here we are arriving at autumn and with the metal element. And I am so delighted to say I've been joined today by the beautiful Donna and Clare, who are both very gifted coaches in their own right and many other skills as well, which I will make sure that I post at the bottom, links to their websites and bits and bobs so you can look them up afterwards. They bring to any conversation, but a particularly fine elemental conversation, the most enormous amount of self-awareness. And that's what we're after as we explore the elements. So thank you, Donna and Clare, for your time, which I value greatly, metal theme. And those who are new to the elemental conversations, I will do a quick recap. First of all, the 5 elements is an ancient philosophy dated back in written form to about 2,500 years old. It's rooted in Taoism, and it sees the 5 elements as the building blocks of life, of all matter, of everything that we see visible around us. And these building blocks create their sort of ongoing transformation from one into the other, create the natural movement and cycles of nature as we see it through the window. And the 5 elements are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Each of them have their own set of correspondences, which are really just their characteristics. And they allow us to hone into very specific energetic qualities that each element it brings, its gifts and its challenges, and allows us through the observation of how they work in nature and through us as human beings, a much greater level of self-awareness as to why we are who we are, the great question. Why we are who we are, and why is it that we do what we do? Because each element gives us an insight to an aspect of our thought, emotion, feeling, behavior that we might otherwise be a little blind to. Or it might be expressing itself in a way that we're not overly comfortable with, but we don't know what to do about it. So the theory of the 5 elements is a beautiful, non-judgmental way of observing behavior, of feeling the movement of the elements within us, and then being able to use well-honed strategies to restore balance and harmony if for any reason those elemental energies have gone out of balance. And we'll know when they do, because we'll see it in strange behavior, dysfunctional relationships, poor health in very specific ways. So the idea is the more familiar we are with the 5 elements, the more aware we are of ourselves, the more sensitive we are to what level of balance, harmony we are holding at any one time. And if we slip from that beautiful place, it gives us a real clear indication of what do we do to restore that joyful balance back into our lives again. So that's the point of the 5 elements, and the point of these conversations is to take the theory and bring it into life through our own personal experiences and our observations. And that's why I love being joined by beautiful souls such as Donna and Clare, so we can have a jolly good dig around and find out what does it mean to have metal moving through us at any time. And one thing I'll remind us of is that we are all the elements all of the time. We will see a yearly cycle like we do when we look out of the window, which is the seasonal cycle, but we'll also have the elements expressing throughout the 24-hour cycle, because each element has its own period of time when it is at its most effective and is at its least effective. And we can again make changes to our lifestyles, habits, and behaviors to make sure we make the best of the gifts that the elements can bring us at any time, year or day. So that's where we're at. Hopefully that's as clear as mud. And so a distillation, very metal theme, a distilling of 17 years of being a traditional acupuncturist, using the 5 elements every single minute of my life, into a conversation with these beautiful girls as to what does it mean to us in metal particularly. So I asked the ladies any observations on metal that they feel very comfortable with in their lives. And we're going to go and look at the comfortable aspect first, and then we're going to look at the not quite so comfortable aspect after that, and see where that friction or that lack of harmony has come from, and maybe suggest a few strategies that we can employ to get things back on a smoother flow. But first, let's just look and tune into autumn with this beautiful photograph behind me. And if you look out of your window, it will be all there in its own visible glory. Autumn is the season of metal. It's really quite easy. It's being inspired through our connection to something higher than ourselves, lifting above the mundane world. And it's about letting go of everything that no longer serves us. Now, there is a host of stuff in between that, but those are the two core themes. And each of those energetic signatures will have an effect on how we deal with life and experience life. So let's start with the bits that feel comfortable. Donna, you kindly said, question and answer, that you found the being connected and inspired part of metal probably the easiest aspect. How does that show up in your life, Donna? How do you consciously engage with metal?
I think pretty much every day I am trying to connect with sort of the inspiration of life, I guess, and connect with that path rather than the very mundane, like to-do list type of stuff, because I burnt myself out doing that quite a few times. So really connecting to what inspiration wants me to do today, what life wants me to do, so I'm really flowing and being very much aware that there is a higher something, that there is that inspiration, that there is that divine guidance there, and that my job is to get myself in alignment with that rather than try and make stuff happen or burn myself out again, trying to do whatever I want to do, connect with that higher guidance.
Beautiful, beautiful. What does that do for your mood, Donna, when you drift? I mean, when you connect, do you notice anything on an emotional plane?
Yeah, much more peaceful, calmer, more joyful. All the good feelings are more accessible.
Yeah.
And all the so-called bad feelings are more, they become more, it's just an experience rather than, oh no, I feel really bad today. It's more like, oh, that's interesting. I feel really bad today. So that having that connection makes it much more like the ride of life rather than the dirge of life.
Yeah, yeah. There's some two beautiful points you've brought out. That calm, that stillness within is a very metal energy. Because when we come to metal, to autumn, the energy is going from the exterior to the interior. When the leaves die, it's because all of the essential energy of the tree has been brought into the trunk, in through the roots to the trunk. So it's pulling back from the exterior, which means that those nutrients aren't getting out to the leaves anymore, which means that they come to their natural end and they die through a riot of color. And then they fall to the ground, and then they re-energize the soil as they rot and decompose. And then they start the whole growth cycle again in the spring. So that coming from the outside to go inwards, not looking so much outside. I know you said about connecting, but actually we're connecting with a higher part of ourselves rather through the material external affairs that we try and be inspired by, but often find it's quite a hollow inspiration. So coming in inevitably leads us to a sense of more peaceful calm. So it's quite, as you pointed out, quite the opposite to the yangy to-do list, tick, 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 which is very wood element and spring. So the metal balances the natural impulse to go out and do and encourages to do more of the being, which is exactly what you do. And Donna, may I ask how many days, continuous days of meditation have you clocked up now? Are you still counting, or have you given up counting?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it's 1600 and something.
Oh,
The
now
Insight Timer app counts for me. I have no idea.
that is an homage to metal, that dutiful commitment to that sense of connection that comes through repetition, through practice, becomes permanent. And that is a beautiful commitment to your soul journey by committing to a daily meditation. If only I had the same level of commitment, and I really do honor that in you, and it's an inspiration to me, all of these lovely metal themes come out. So thank you, Donna. Brilliant. We'll come back to all of that. Claire, what do you find easily accessible in the metal energy?
Oh, I'm just thinking I want to be more Donna.
Yes, yes, yes. Less Claire, more Donna. Right. There's an inspiration. What comes easily to
Something
you?
to aspire
What do
to.
you notice in your life that is metally?
Without a doubt, the one thing that resonates the most for me in metal is the stripping back. So the kind of the cutting to the core. And it's something that I think in terms of, let's say, my tolerance of, say, superficial things or waffle. So I'm much more, examples would be, I'm much more into, I want to get to know a person and find out who they are, rather than, although I'm sociable, I'd like to meet lots of people in a party and find out how they are and who they are, rather than just the hubbub of the party and being in the right place at the right time. And so and in work, that's really helpful in some ways, because very much how you were saying, when you were saying about going outside in, that's very much my kind of MO of my approach to things. I'll take all the detail, and people will say that I'm really good at getting to the core of something and finding the threads. And I'm really happy when something's an absolute mess. I happen to have freaky, really good spatial awareness. So when there's a mess, I love ordering it. So how many things can fit in a space? That kind of, and it's a similar thing. It's a similar kind of mindset of working out where the line, where it's more linear, where you don't need the excess. So for me, that's really comfortable. And I would say, in terms of my personality, there's also almost the side of that can be misinterpreted, is that I can come across as aloof or too straight to the point when someone else wants to carry on talking about something, or because I want to be able to see through the excessive, what I would term as the excessive detail, because the fundamentals, what really matters, what's really important, as you're talking about, say, nutrition, what really is feeding something is almost where my motivation lies. So I'd say that's where I'm really comfortable. That resonates with me the most, I think, probably out of metal, when you're first kind of thinking about the characteristics.
Yeah. And as you say, you've fallen into or consciously chosen a career path that plays to those strengths, in terms of, how are you going to coach somebody by getting through to the absolute core essence of the core nature of something, no matter what they present, the stories they tell, the sort of the barriers they will put up. I know I've seen your eyes. There's a laser-like focus that you can just keep drilling through and drilling through. Now, that is an exquisite gift that metal brings us, and it has its challenges, because, as you so rightly pointed out, Claire, if we're hobnobbing with people who have a preference for the other elements, shall we say, who are perhaps more fiery, looking to Donna, less metally, the story is the most important part. You can't have something that does not have this story attached to it, and it will be an emotional one as well. Something about relationships, it's so meaningful. And metal can really get a bad press when it continues to press home to get to the truth. But for fire, the importance is to give the whole context, the ins and outs, the background, where we've been, not necessarily where we're going, but certainly where we've been and where we are now. How does that resonate, Donna, as more aligned with the fire element than metal?
Oh yeah, 100%.
How does it feel
100%.
when you're with somebody who has a strong metal energy within them? And we're all the elements all of the time, but people will have a preference. How does it feel to be in their presence?
It usually feels slightly limiting, but
Yes.
in a
Funny
fiery
that,
way.
isn't
I'm
it?
just like going over it and stop trying to get to the core of it. I have a story to tell.
Yes.
15 side quests to talk about first.
Yes.
So
And
I actually find it really tricky if I'm talking to someone who is quite metally, because I am very, if I tell a story, there will be 15 side quests to get back to the point. I'll get back to the point eventually, but it could be 3 days later. And I find it really difficult to focus and just make my point. I find that really hard work. It's good though, because it's challenging.
well, it's a great discipline for all of us when we're looking to, I mean, when we come into our full breadth and depth as a personality aspect in this incarnation, we really want to be quite masterful in all the elements. There'll always be one that we're more drawn to, that will be our habituated response to life in the first instance, just come as a knee-jerk reaction. But actually the mastery comes from when we can be well versed in all the elements and really develop them to the extent that we can, even if it's uncomfortable. So Donna, my experience, and Claire, when I'm with metal, certainly in clinic, without even having met my new patient, if I detect metal, first thing I'll do is go into, oh, it's like being with a headmaster. Oh, I'm going to have to get this really right. They're going to see right through me. I better know my stuff. No, there's no mucking about. There's no sort of double entendres or punning or anything like that. It is keep it absolutely straight and level. Get to the point, be concise, don't mess, don't try and be friends with them. That's not what they want. They want you to be expert and competent. And it's the easiest element for me to identify in a patient, because I will have that response as they walk into the room. They haven't even said anything. I can just feel it. And I'll notice it in myself more than I'll notice it in them. So that's really interesting. And this morning when I was preparing for our chat, I was thinking, right, I really value their time because I know how busy you two are. And how difficult it was to get this three-way conversation in the same season. And I thought, right, I'm not going to waste it. I better be, I must be clear. I must be on point, not waste time. And it was all the metal stuff was coming out. All of the metal stuff was coming out. So if somebody is very metally, metal element is high on their hierarchy of the 5. If they're finding that they're not really making friends and influencing people, and they're actually turning people off, one thing is to be very aware of that and then to start warming themselves up. And how do they do that? They use the relationship across one of the cycles that we work with in traditional acupuncture, which is with fire, specifically with fire, because fire warms up a cold, brittle metal. So if the metal person feels too cut off, too aloof, too remote, too judgmental, too critical, because they've set the bar very high and they expect everybody to get to it, or else they would just dismiss them, then that self-awareness will be extraordinarily useful. Then say, right, what can I do about this? And one of the strategies is, I better pull on my fire and warm up a bit. And then they can soften those hard edges of metal, become a little more sociable. And even though it's painful, you can still learn to engage in chit chat. Are you watching Strictly Come Dancing? I mean, it's not a metal conversation, it's a fire conversation. And that's lovely, because that's when we can start to sort of break down barriers and build relationships and rapport. And if we're still quite metally within, that's fine, because once we've engaged with that person, built trust, very important for fire, building trust, then we can start to do that drilling in a slightly tempered way, I would say, especially for fire people. Claire, if you're working with metal, it'll be the quickest and most efficient interview consultation you'll ever have, because it'll be done and dusted in 3 minutes. With fire, schedule 3 days, as Donna rightly pointed out, but allow for that interaction within ourselves to bring out the best in the other person.
And that's something that, because my dominant is fire.
Yeah.
But I reckon I noticed that, and what I do notice as well is that you have almost this this battle that goes on. So let's say, like Donna, I'm storytelling or I'm doing it, then I'll catch myself and become self-conscious and think, depending on what you're interpreting in the room with the other person, and suddenly think, oh, I better cut to the quick now because they're expecting me to get off the story.
Yeah.
Because then you know, you kind of get out of yourself in a way. So it's fascinating how we do mix all of those elements.
Yes, and it's the self-awareness that is the key. And we're not judging, and that's the wonderful thing. You catch yourself when you're in your fiery mode and well into the storytelling, and then you catch yourself think, now what is my purpose for being here? What is my focus? Metal themes. Do I need to now, have I established that rapport? Have I warmed everybody up? Right, shall I now get to the point, exactly as you say, in a way that hopefully lets people down gently, especially in the fires. The woods will already be planning what you're going to say next and interrupting you anyway. The waters will be just nervous and just wondering how the hell to get out of there. Earth is obviously feeding everybody and saying, I'll just go and get some cakes, I'll top up the tea. And fire's having the best time because you're all together getting on. So you know what, it's a wonderful dance. There's no judgment about whether it's right or wrong. And that's why I adore this philosophy in terms of self-development. Nothing puts you in a box. Nothing says you can only be that and nothing else. We are all of it all of the time. And it's just so much fun to notice what we're most comfortable, which element we're most comfortable in, and then learn to broaden the reach of the others, I would say. So that's lovely. Those are sort of, when we notice we play with metal. And I think when we're in the coaching industry, it's a service, actually. It's less of an industry. It's more of, we want to serve, which is a very metal thing. We're inspired by what we do because we can see the changes in people where they start to actually become more authentic. And that's just so fulfilling. And these are very metally things. So actually in what we do, we are very much in service to the higher nature of that person. So that's the fulfillment as coaches, I feel. And of course, we're inspired to just do it better as best as we can, but then do it better. Other things with metal, and we briefly talked about the leaves dying, falling off the trees, but going out in a blaze of glory. We've got the big death thing going on with metal. It's dying. By the time we get to winter, everything's already dead. So that's a whole different energetic in the water element. But in metal, we are observing the dying process. And I would suggest that probably in the Western Hemisphere, we're not very good at death, dying and death. In the East, I think we'd be a lot more comfortable with the rituals of the East. Did you know that in ancient China, executions only took place in autumn, the time of the metal element, because there was this recognition of delivering justice. So justice has been delivered, the verdict has been done and justice will be delivered. And that if it's execution, then the executioner, much revered as a career choice, would be expected to be ultra professional, lacking all sentimentality, not trying to make friends with the poor prisoner, the one that's been condemned, but will deliver his blow with absolute precision, accuracy and precision, and a real sense of value in delivering that blow exceptionally, exquisitely, perfectly. So there you are. And that's why the color of metal is white, because this philosophy, the Taoist philosophy, originated in the East. So it's black for us, but it's white for them because it's bleach bones. It's stripping back to the absolute bare essentials of what is underneath. And there's a joy in seeing the leaves fall from the trees, because I don't know about you, but I can only identify a tree by its silhouette. I don't know when it's fully laden with leaves. I find it quite difficult. There's some I can pick out, but mostly it's the shape that I see in winter, autumn and winter, as the leaves fall, and then I can recognize the shape of the growth of the branches, and I think, oh, that's an ash. Whereas when I'm seeing an ash, with all these leaves, I think, oh, is it? I don't know. So it's quite it's quite lovely to be actually to strip it all back and see the true nature and essence of everything and the value. So what do we do about grief? So the emotion to do with metal element is grief. I shouldn't think there's many people on the planet that haven't experienced grief in some form. Many run away from it because it's just too painful. Others will walk towards it whilst knowing it is an extremely challenging journey. And of course, we have the bereavement cycle that is well known, the various phases that we go through. But in this particular philosophy, grief follows from connection, recognition, and then loss. So you can't grieve something you've never connected with in the first place. And the depth of grief will probably reflect the level of connection that you had with whatever it is that you've lost. And the emotion of grief is what follows on from that. So part of the process of grief is to recognize the connection and celebrate it, accept that that connection has been severed in a material form, but using the ability of metal to connect us to some higher thing, being, energy, source, God, whatever we want to call it, brings us that comfort that there is a connection that is enduring beyond the physical plane, and that will help us to move through the grief. I've treated many, many patients who've been stuck in grief. And it's not really the emotions that are the difficulty, it's the fact that they are stuck in them. And the Taoist philosophy about emotion of any nature is it should flow through us as easily as the wind blows through the leaves on a tree. That is health. So we should feel the pain of loss. Absolutely. To run from that will only store it up and bring us difficulty down the line. If we can sit with the loss by recognizing that we had that blissful connection and feeling the love in our hearts from the fire, and allowing and accepting that there is a natural cycle to life, which includes death, enterings, exitings, beginnings, and endings. If we can accept that in the metal, then we will be able to manage the grief, I'm going to say, in a healthier way. It's no fun, it's never going to be enjoyable, let's be honest, but maybe a healthier way. If we get stuck in any way, any part of that process, resistance, I do not accept this, then we will get stuck in the emotion, and that will cause us difficulty to our health. So it's a tricky one. And I'm going to come to Donna, because the metal, death and dying, is the polar opposite of the fire, which is early summer, which is the epitome of expansion and growth. It is the absolute opposite energy of the coming inwards, the decaying, the dying. So for fire element energy, Donna, how do you feel when we've gone through fire, we've gone through earth, late summer, the harvest time, still warm, sun's still shining, but things maturing and coming to the end? How do you feel when you come into the metal season of autumn?
It's actually changed in the last few years since I've gone into perimenopause, just because my temperature gauge in my body is not working very well. So I now hate summer because it's too hot.
Yeah.
So autumn, I'm like, oh, thank God, I don't have to worry about 22 plus degrees anymore. But it used to be the most depressing time of year, the nights drawing in, the whole, I used to hate it, really hated it. I like what the natural world does in autumn. I've always liked that, you know, kicking through the leaves, and that's if it's dry. Of course, it's been raining here for what seems like 1,000 days, but when you've got that sort of dry, sunny, you can kick through the leaves like you're 5 years old again. I love that, and I've always loved that. But I used to really hate with a passion the nights drawing in and it getting cooler. As I say, now my temperature gauge has changed. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Bring out the jumpers, I'm happy now.
It's a blessing.
So it's really changed just in the last few years, which is interesting. But it's interesting that a lot of the things about metal, it's one of the elements that I just don't really resonate with very well, but so much about it is great. You know, the kitchen to the core and the inspiration and the going within. I love all that stuff. So it's weird that I can't connect to metal. And I just wanted to mention as well, when you were talking about the grief thing, the very first time I realized how beautiful grief can be was I lost a family member, and I was so sad for so long. And then one day I realized this is because you love them so much. And that's a beautiful thing. So there's a kind of strange beauty in that grief and in that metal and dealing with it. And it did help me to deal with the loss, to realize that, well, this is, you know, it was a good thing that you had that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the amount of grief you have is because you had that amount of love. So that's a good thing. But yeah, so it's interesting, again, back to your question, that actually going into autumn, I suspect for a fire is normally horrific, but actually I'm like, yay, it's cool.
It's cool. It's cool. Thank you, my darling. That's lovely. Yes, that physical connection to something. The loss comes from not having the physicality, but the comfort comes from having the connection in the first place. And then that's the journey that we go on, how to bring those two into a place of peaceful ease and acceptance. Yeah. Claire, what about you as you come into, as a fiery person, as you come into autumn, coming to the sort of the opposite end of the seasonal cycle to fire? How does it feel?
Like Donna, I really appreciate the leaves and the change and all of those things. I don't at all like, for me, it's the light. It's the change in the light. If we had everything else, but we can keep the light, it's and I'm quite a night owl, so it affects in some ways, whereas I guess if you're early in the morning and you get more light. So that's the main way it happens for me, I think. And observing the grief is, I think this tallies, is that the one thing that I handle worst out of anything is disappointment. And it's letting go of very, very fiery, hopeful, optimistic, opportunity, all that kind of thing. It's having had that image of whatever it was, to almost like to admit defeat and to probably give up that hope until you go through, until kind of like it's resonated for a while. And then, as Donna was describing grief, almost where when I can resonate it to, when I can align it to seeing the learning in the experience, then it picks up again. So it's almost like it's that cyclical thing. But if I could speed up my handling of disappointment, I would be eternally grateful. It's probably the single thing that slows me down, that I would say is probably aligned to metal than anything, that it kind of gets in my way, I would say.
That's a really interesting observation. I mean, there is an attachment to an outcome that sits across all of the elements. All the elements have their own very beautiful way of being very attached to the outcome. And when that outcome doesn't quite come off the way we had hoped and anticipated, then there is inevitable disappointment. There is an expectation reality gap that is crushing when it's at its worst and manageable when it's perhaps a little more superficial. So what do we do about it? Metal is the gift that says there is a higher purpose. There is a divine plan. You know, and this is non-religious. This is just a more spiritual way of interpreting, whereby we can have that deep, profound connection to our higher self, our guides, something bigger than that, whatever our orientation is, and almost like surrender. Oh my gosh, I'm sounding like my dear mother in the Catholic faith. There's a surrendering of that dream, of that hope in wood, of that sunny optimism. Oh, it'll be fine in fire. Surrendering that as it's been formed and nurtured and by the earth and fed and watered, and then letting it go. Oh my goodness. And if you visualize a balloon that is filled not with air, but with hopes and dreams, And then you beautifully form it, you pump it as hard as you can with all of those hopes and dreams, and they're bright and beautiful and much love and all of that. And then you let go of the string and you let it fly away. And it will take root and land somewhere intact and sprout if it's meant to, or it will pop on its journey, skewered by some bare branch, damn it, and never take root and never develop and mature into anything. And like the Rudyard Kipling poem, if you treat triumph and disaster just the same. So the speeding up of that expectation reality gap and the inevitable disappointment that follows will come from right at the very beginning of your journey, when you dream a dream and you release it with optimism and hope and joy and love, and then you let it go. And you allow for it to do whatever it was always meant to do, regardless of what that looks like. And you wouldn't be you if you didn't feel deeply attached to the dream, because that's what fire does. It imbues it with love and it never lets it go. So be you and dream and dream and dream. That's what fire does. It dreams impossible dreams, ever optimistic that it'll be fine, it'll all come good in the end. And let it go from the outset. And let it go from the outset. The minute you've blown up that balloon, let it go. And trust, fire, that divine will, metal, will come into fruition in the way that is for your betterment and highest good, metal. So how does that sit?
Yeah, my second element is wood. So there's always that thing of, okay, which one's playing? Which one's coming to the fore? So it's, yeah, it raises a lot of questions, but it is that thing of coming back to the bigger picture.
Yeah,
I think, which is always helpful with all of the elemental work.
Yes, it is. Being inspired by something greater than that individual aspect. I mean, we are individuated selves. We are personality aspects deliberately in this 3D matrix, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience, rather than a human being ever so slightly spiritual, you know, and having the odd knock on the shoulder every now and again. It's the other way around. So invert it and live a more spiritual life as a human. And then it will be less difficult to let go of those dreams and let them fly and see where they land. And it's one observation with the wood that you mentioned. Wood is about planning. It's spring energy. It's about planning, decision making. It's list making. Let's hear it for the list makers. It's ticking off. It's very, very active in its yang doingness. Busy is a wood. Wood has loads of ideas in a planning sort of way, vision, so it can see over the horizon, see how something could become manifest, and it will plan to the inch of its life to get that to come into that fruition. So it'll plough the fields, then it'll sow the seeds, and then it'll do those early sort of bits of nurturing. But wood can have, I don't know about you, but my wood can have a dozen great visions, great plans, great decisions to be made. And I will get so dissipated, to be like my fuchsia, I shall get very leggy and I won't have much strength because I'll be dissipating my wood energy. I'll lose focus completely. I'll do that and then I'll do that. I'm plate spinning. Oh my God. And I'm all over the shop. So metal acts across one of these beautiful relationship cycles and it prunes me back. I can't prune my garden, although I'm learning. I've had a good go at the fuchsia this year. I'm quite proud of myself, and I pruned the apple tree, probably never fruit again. But the metal in bringing that focus back helps to stop a wood dissipating with too many big visions and all the plans that go with it. So we can pull on the metal in our wood to have a more focused growth, much more, you know, maybe three visions will be great, not 12, and really bring it back to the core essence. What is it that I want to achieve here? How do I go about doing that? And that alone, not 17 things on the way to achieving that. but just that thing. Brilliant. Okay, so that brings us on to the letting go, doesn't it? So the two officials, we have organs, we call them officials, relating to the metal element are lung and large intestine. Each element has its own set of organs or officials, and they have many more responsibilities beyond the physical functions that we just see in the Western world. So lung and large intestine, we've talked about the lung inspiring the breath. How many of our meditation strategies require breathing techniques? So much of what we do is based on the breath, mental health, breathing, calming, peripheral vision, coming into a calmer state of mind through the breath. So the breathing, the lung, is incredibly important to use it well. And most of us operate at a shallow breathing level, especially if we're stressed and we don't take lungfuls, and nor do we exhale the stale breath. So learning breathing techniques is incredibly important to our health. I'm a mouth breather, amazing, seems I talk so much, but I'm always clogged up here. So it's just easier for me to breathe in my mouth because I'm walking so quickly and doing things so quickly all the time. But actually that's no good for my health. I need to be a nasal breather for my health. And I learned a method called Buteyko method, which improved my sleep no end, nasal breathing. So that's the lung part of it, being inspired, taking in inspiration. Large intestine, letting go of everything that no longer serves us. Donna, would you care to share your large intestine experiences, perhaps not graphically on the physical level, but how they play out on other levels in your life?
I'm very glad you said that. Yeah, so the aspect of metal I find most difficult is letting go of anything,
Right.
which interestingly throughout my life has corresponded to my physical self. But yeah, letting go clutter, letting go of anything. You know, I guess that fiery, come here, and
Yeah.
I'm keeping everything. So I find that really, really hard. I envy the trees that are letting go of leaves with what appears to be such ease, although you never know, inside them might be going, no, like me. So yeah, it's the thing that I wish I could get a handle on, actually.
Yeah.
To you know, I'm sort of looking around and I'm thinking, so much clutter, there's so much stuff just here, and would be so nice to be able to pare back to the essentials. And but of course, as fire, I think everything's essential.
Yes.
You know, I keep things for 20 years that I might use.
Never use. I'm aware that there is a healthy relationship between fire and metal, because fire warms up a very cold metal, but it doesn't work in the opposite direction. Fire serves wood. Sorry, the metal serves the wood. It doesn't serve the fire in response. So we're going to have to dig into the metal and understand why that letting go is such a challenge. And it's interesting. Sometimes the element that we're not terribly comfortable with is not the one to go and find the solution. Often it is, because that virtue of that elemental energy is exactly what we need to tap into. But often, sometimes we have to go to another element because it's more comfortable. And with the letting go, the fire is such a creative energy, so many new ideas. I mean, you're literally tripping over creative ideas. The more stuff you have cluttering up your mind, your emotional realm, your physical space, the less those new ideas can be created, can be birthed, can be conceived, can be expressed. So if it's too hard to let go, you may want to put your focus on the fire and say, but I want more ideas. I want more creativity in my life. And to have more creativity, I need to make a little bit of space to let that creative flow in, give it space to expand in a yang way that fire likes, rather than coming at it from a contracting yin energy, which says, let it go, frozen. That might be too big a jump. So maybe focus more on the fire. Say, I want more creativity, more space to grow and expand, in which case that needs to go without necessarily going into the metal mode, which is perhaps uncomfortable. But in essence, large intestine absolutely knows absolutely knows it will get the last bit of nutrient out of whatever we are passing through the intestinal system before it passes it on to the bowel to excrete. So once it's gone past the large intestine, there really is nothing to hang on to. And for fire, it's about trust. What if I make a mistake? And water. What if I let go of something that I will really need, my life depends on, and I'll regret it? And all of these stories start, and then we hang on, and we hang on. Cutting back to weighing up the value of something. What is the value of that thing that has been gathering dust on the end of my desk for the last 15 years? What is the value of it to me now? If it's sentimental and has some heart connection, brilliant. But if you're still short of space, maybe take a photograph and then let the physical thing go and put the photograph up on the wall. So it'll always remind you of that lovely memory of when you bought that pig, you know, little thing, and China pig, or all of that, and all the lovely joy that that brings you, that you don't need the physical thing maybe. So come into metal in terms of maybe value. What is the value of that thing now? Does it still serve that purpose? Could I keep the value of it in a different way? Use your fire creativity. How else could I keep that memory alive? That might be a way of it. Otherwise you will drown under your clutter and suffocate. Claire, how are you at letting go?
In some ways similar to Donna. Donna and I have had these conversations in depth. In terms of, it's much easier for me to be creative, go on to a next thing, go on to a new project, the excitement of anything where I'm going to learn something. It's so much easier to get into rather than making a decision about something that might need to go. And because I have to weigh up that value, for me looking ahead, and also is much easier. And also I've noticed when I was thinking, oh, we're going to be talking about metal, is that my pattern in life, if you like, has been when life's thrown curveballs, when it's been grief, when something, you know, relationships ends, or you've had, whether it's a redundancy, whatever, my survival mechanism, if you like, my autopilot has been get busy, go and do that, go very much go forward, as opposed to stop and work through the feeling and evaluate. And I think you can kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater a bit in terms of you're not benefiting from the reflection at that stage. And so that's something that I notice, which is because that feels like harder work to have to go through that evaluation rather than the hope and the optimism of the walking forwards, which obviously isn't for everybody, but for me, I've noticed that walking forward is so much easier facing front than looking back. And what I've noticed is, particularly when I was in a relationship with someone that was really nostalgic, and I was thinking, crikey, the whole time it seems like you don't have any hope. And they would dismiss conversations around hope, but they were always going on to the good old times, And I was really aware of the mismatch in energy, because I don't place the same value in nostalgia. Has its place, and, you know, fashions and memories and all that kind of stuff. But for me, they're not something, I don't spend my time going over them. So there's that thing of, in some ways, there'll be times when that's a benefit, and there are times when it isn't.
Yeah. And I really resonate with that. It's funny, isn't it, how each of the elements in certain contexts seem to be working really harmoniously and healthily, and in other ones not so good. I'm not great at giving up clutter until I get to the point that I'm so irritated by my own clutter that it all goes. Not all, there are certain things with huge sentimental value that I keep and I look at and get mildly irritated by and think, could I just let that go? No, I can't. Okay, I'll leave it till next year. But in relationships, anybody who says to me, oh, I'm really good friends with my ex, I just look at them with utter incomprehension. Because once I've made the decision, and that can take years, I might add, I can drag it out, better the devil you know, but once the decision is made, it's the executioner's acts, and there is no looking back. And people say, oh, have you talked to your ex-husband? No. Why? Why would I? Do you know where he is? No. Why? Why would I ever look to see where he? What interest is it to me that, you know, that has served its purpose and it's done? And I'm sure they don't want me chasing them up either. But it's really strange how I can see metal as such a clean break in certain areas once the decision is made, and then this rather tortuous hanging and clinging journey until I get to that point. But I am grateful that I do ultimately get to a point where it is gone. Because I don't know what my house would look like, and I don't know what my mind would be like if I wasn't able to do that. I'm sure it's a survival instinct. Something I'd like to pick up, Claire, you mentioned about that reflection and evaluation. That slips a little bit into water, into winter, which is the conversation we'll be having in 6 weeks' time, where we review everything that's gone before in order to learn from it and accrue wisdom, because it's the wisdom that we accrue that means that we'll be able to apply it to the next set of circumstances, which would hopefully ensure our survival. So in a way, what's so difficult, and Donna, you mentioned this, right? You know, don't quite know how to get hold of metal. You know, it is insubstantial metal. You know, it's a constant movement of in, out, in, out. There's not much hanging around in metal. And because of its very spiritual nature, it's what imbues us with this higher mind, if you like, this bigger connection. It's less tangible in this material realm. And in fact, metal says don't get attached to anything particularly material. That's something else. You know, earth is a very, very tangible element and energy. It's what we eat, it's what we drink, it's what we assimilate, it's the energy we make, it's what we put around the body, the mind, and the spirit in order to, you know, to grow and to be nourished. But it with metal, it is literally blowing through the leaves of the tree like the wind. You cannot really grab hold of it, and that's what makes it quite a tricky thing to engage with, because it doesn't really want to be engaged with. It's a recognition, it's an acceptance, it's a letting go. That's it. So hopefully that's not helpful at all, Donna, for you or for any of us in terms of, you know, how do we hang on to metal? Because the answer is we don't. It's quite simple. So be okay with always thinking, I don't think I really know what metal is. Because I spent my entire 17 years so far thinking, I don't think I really know anything about metal. But once we come down to the core themes, we realize how much we are guided by our own metal energy and how we can use it to help us if we get stuck in life. We really do want to be able to tap into metal. Cut to the quick.
It's interesting because as you've talked about it, I've thought actually there's a lot more metal in my life than I realised.
Yeah.
One of the things with clutter clearing, how I used to clutter clear in years gone by is I'd get really bad PMT and just throw everything I own away.
Out the window?
Absolutely, yeah. 5 black bags in the bin. Don't need them, don't want them, get out.
Yep.
I don't have the energy for that kind of, because I used to spend like 5 hours just throwing everything I own. And I never regretted a thing.
No.
Incidentally, well, a few times I did think, oh God, I'm gonna have to go and buy another one of them now, but it was never that big a deal. But yeah, I don't have the energy to do that now, so it never happens. But the other thing that you mentioned about metal was paring it down to the core thing, and rather than having 17 things going at once. As you know, I was very woody for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I always had 28 projects on the go and I never finished one. Cal surprise. And then there came a point when I'd burnt out for like the 3rd or 4th time, and I thought, this has got to stop. Okay, what do I really want to finish? Let's finish that one thing. And it was, as you said that, I was thinking that's a really metally thing that I did without knowing it.
Yes.
And I think that actually that's the thing with metal. I think when I'm being woody or fiery or watery or earthy, I can see it, whereas the metal is so decisive. It's finished before I've even realized I've done it.
And that is a brilliant point. Thank you so much for bringing it up. Metal is instinctual. The spirit residing in metal is called the Po, and it is the animal instinct, the corporeal soul. So it's not a thinking thing, which is earth. It is not a heart thing and fully engaging with it, which is the fire. It's not a planning thing, which is the wood. It's not survival, which is the water. It is instinctual. So you're absolutely right. That judgment has been made before we even process the thinking that's gone on. You walk into a room, I really don't like that energy. Not saying not the person, I don't like the energy. It's an instinctual reaction. Absolutely bloody spot on. That's another nature, because we don't have to engage with it at a cerebral level. And when we walk into a cathedral, whether we're religious or not, and just look at the architecture and listen to the sound of chorus song or whatever, and we just sit there and go, oh, we're not thinking now, why do I feel all overwhelmed? Why am I feeling tearful, but I'm really joyful? We are just in that sublime moment of bliss, of connection. So that is a really, really good point. Instinctual is the Po. It's that sensory thing that comes from deep within, before we ruin it by overthinking it and doing everything and talking ourselves out of it. Yeah, brilliant point. Thank you, Donna. Before we close, Claire, anything that you would like to add in terms of the metal wandering? Actually, it's not a wander, is it?
Just in this conversation, I hadn't really realised before, but funnily enough, kept getting to the point. Is that it's making me think, when you were thinking about kind of like death and grief, and you know how they say that nurses, you see memes and things online, say nurses say that these are the most common things that people say on their deathbed, and the things that were absolutely important and the rest didn't matter. I think what I'm going away from this conversation is thinking, and whether it's decluttering or whatever, or it's projects, is just getting that point of, like you say, it's instinctual, just almost listening for yourself and just taking that moment to think, okay, what really matters?
Yeah.
Because often we know that we choose to ignore it because we get caught up in the stuff. And I think that probably also for me in the season, if I'm not that keen on the fact that the light going, if I can kind of shift it into, there's the value in it for me, there's the value in it for what I'm doing, that I can turn it into something, the energy that will work for me better. Yes. That's what I think I'm coming to.
Brilliant. Oh, that's beautiful. Because we're never going to come to, as a fire element energy, we're never going to come to terms with dark days. It is the polar opposite of what fire wants, light. However, there is merit in taking the opportunity that this seasonal cycle gives us in terms of letting go, of doing that clear out, of coming back to the bare bones of it and getting to the core essence of what it is that we want, we hope for, we dream of, really paring it down, refining it, and then taking that through the reflective process in winter, and then preparing and planning for the growth of it in the spring. And so the cycle goes on and on and on. What is the value in it for me, for self and others? Where is the betterment here? Yeah, beautiful. I remember just my closing, very profound point, when I was studying for my acupuncture degree, and I was having acupuncture all the way through. Well, I'd had it 2 years before, which is what inspired me. But I'd asked my practitioner to give me metal treatments just coming up to assignment time, because as a wood person, sitting down to write an assignment to a deadline is really quite tricky. Because I think, oh, I'll just get up and do that. Oh, I'll wash my net curtains. Oh, I'll just weed the garden. Oh, I've got 17 things to do between here and sitting down at the actual laptop and starting to bring it all together. And so she'd give me a metal treatment. I tell you, the rest of the world disappeared. The focus, which is such an unnatural thing for me, the distillation of my vision into what is in front of me, nothing more and nothing less. By God, I could crack that bloody essay out. And you know me, I'm a very wordy person, but you know, you've got a word count on an essay, and the metal was what I had to pull in so much. So I thought, oh, give us a metal treatment, and it was so easy. I thought, God, life would be great if I could do it like this all the time. but then that wouldn't be me, would it? So, because we'd have wrapped this conversation up in 10 minutes, and then where's the fun in that? Where's the fun in that? No fiery conversation, no laughter, no sharing, just to the point. But I should try one, shouldn't I? Just so pure metal. Yeah, here's metal. Read my notes. There's the handout. Bye. Much better. About to wade through an hour. God love them. Thank you. Thank you. Bless you, darling souls, for your time, your energy, your commitment, and your sharing. Really enjoyed it. If there's anything else you want to add, just drop me a little message and I could just put a little message. But thank you. Really, really enjoyed our little conversation on metal. Bless you both. Go well. May it be easy. See you both soon. Bye for now. Bye bye.